There was a king who was very proud of himself. He believed that he knew everything and possessed vast knowledge. His ministers and other courtiers often flattered him. The king had acquired knowledge from many scholars and began to think that there was nothing in this world that he didn't know. One day, filled with pride, the king made a proclamation in his kingdom. Anyone who could bring 3 facts to him that he did not know would be awarded half his kingdom. But if they failed to do so, they would be punished with death. After this announcement, many people thought about it, but none dared to approach the king because they feared he truly knew everything and didn't want to risk their lives. After several days, a wise and clever young man named Cyrus, who lived outside the city, learned of the king's proclamation. Cyrus came to the royal court, where ministers and respected citizens were present to witness the king's decision and ensure that it was fair. Everyone thought that this foolish young man had come to the court to die. The king, seeing Cyrus, was pleased and asked him, "What is your name?" The young man replied, "Cyrus." The king asked, "So, you claim to know something that I don't?" Cyrus replied, "Yes, your majesty. I know many things that you don't." Hearing this, the king felt a bit hurt and asked, "Do you understand the punishment if you fail to prove your claim?" Cyrus nodded, "Yes, I understand." The king said, "Then tell me what I don't know." Cyrus replied, "I will tell you 3 things, but I have one condition before I start. If you agree to it, I will proceed." The king asked, "What is your condition?" Cyrus replied, "I will reveal 1 fact per day over 3 days." The king looked at his ministers and then agreed to the condition. On the first day, Cyrus said, "Your Majesty, your fame as a knowledgeable king is widespread, but perhaps you don't know how many citizens reside in your kingdom or the exact census count." The king's face showed slight displeasure, but he quickly gave a number, claiming he knew it well, and said, "There are 523,937 people in my kingdom." The courtiers praised the king, and everyone stood up in admiration. Cyrus, however, laughed. The king, seeing this, asked, "Has the fear of death driven you mad?" Cyrus replied, "No, your majesty. My death is not today, as your answer is incorrect. Just before coming here, a villager named Manoor passed away, and 3 newborns were also born in a nearby village. Do they not count as part of your kingdom?" There was murmuring in the court, and a minister interjected, "You are trying to be clever, the count of the living and the dead changes every day." Cyrus responded, "Am I wrong, or is the count changing?" The court deliberated, and since prominent citizens were present, they could not easily dismiss Cyrus's point, so his statement was accepted. He left, saying he would return the next day. The king grew concerned and ordered his ministers to keep a close watch on Cyrus and provide him with updated statistics by nightfall. The next day, Cyrus returned with a confident smile, making the king feel uneasy about what he might ask next. Cyrus stood up and said, "Your Majesty, you have acquired knowledge from many sources, but sometimes people miss what is close by while focusing on distant things." The king replied, "Go ahead, tell me what I don't know." Cyrus said, "You sit on this grand throne, but do you know who made it?" The king replied, "Yes, it was made by my grandfather, and after him, my father, then I, and then my successor shall sit on it. I know this well." The ministers looked pleased. Cyrus said, "I am aware that you know this, but I want to tell you something you don't know." He continued, "This throne doesn't have 4 legs but 5. Do you know why there's an additional thick leg in the middle?" The king replied, "It must be for added strength." Cyrus countered, "Must be, or is." The king grew tense and said, "It is for strength. You are trying to be too clever." Cyrus replied, "No, your majesty. I will tell you. Your grandfather, King Pushkarnath, ruled this kingdom for 50 years. And this throne was given to him as a reward for his strong rule. The 5 legs signify each of those 10 years. The king looked at his courtiers with anger, wondering why they hadn't told him this. He asked Sarah's, "How do you know this? You were young, how can you know something so old?" Sarah's replied, "You will find the answer to that in my 3rd statement, which you don't know. For now, I will take my leave." The king ordered his ministers to investigate Sarah's thoroughly, saying he could not afford to lose half his kingdom. The following day, Sarah's returned, and the king said, "Come in, I know now that you were telling the truth about the throne because it was made by your grandfather and given to mine. That's how you knew. But now, you have nothing left to reveal that I don't know. You shall be punished, as I cannot go back on my word." Sarah smiled and said, "Your Majesty, it doesn't suit you to say this because you come from a family that breaks promises." The court erupted in shock. The king, furious, shouted, "How dare you speak this way about my family? What promise did we break?" Sarah's replied, "Oh, I thought you had uncovered everything, so perhaps you knew this as well." The king asked, "What?" Sarah said, "When my grandfather gave this throne to your grandfather, he was so pleased that he promised my grandfather 200 acres of land and 500 gold coins. But soon after, your grandfather passed away, and my grandfather said that one day, the new king would honor that promise. We have been waiting since then. First, my grandfather passed away waiting, then my father. When I heard your proclamation, I thought it was the right time to remind you. So, if you didn't know this, you owe me half your kingdom. If you did know, you must fulfill your grandfather's promise. I leave it to you to decide." The king, faced with the entire court and the respect for his ancestors, couldn't tarnish his family's reputation. Nor could he deny the promise without giving up half his kingdom. The king had fallen into his own trap. Knowing he couldn't punish Sarah's, the king declared, "I knew of this promise, and I will not punish this young man. Instead, I will honor my grandfather's word." The court erupted in applause and cheers for the king, but the king sat quietly, looking at Sarah's, regretting the challenge he had set up for himself.